You're listening to Crazy Shit in Real Estate. You'll be amazed at all these wild but true situations that others have found themselves in. Because on this show, you'll hear uncensored, unbelievable stories from the world of real estate. I'm Leigh Brown. Let's dive right in.
I'm Leigh Brown. This is Crazy Shit in Real Estate. I get to bring y'all somebody special today. She is one of my real estate mamas, and this is the past president of the North Carolina REALTORS from back in 2003, Miss Connie Corey. I know you're going to enjoy getting to know her a little bit better because she's one of our special signing stars in North Carolina and beyond. So buckle up, enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you on the other side. You put on makeup and a fancy outfit. We matched today.
Go, dude, look at us. How coincidental.
I found my past president's medal in honor of your episode. It's laying up there on my shelf where I can find it again next time because I couldn't find it for John's installation.
I had two and left them at home.
Thought you offered to give one away, or was that just all talk?
Huh?
Thought you offered to give one away for somebody who couldn't find theirs, but was that just talk?
Hell, I didn't even bring my own. Look, I was looking at some of the people that have been on this podcast before, and I feel like they wrote it. I mean, they are huge.
We just have an interesting bunch of people. I love having interesting people, and who's more interesting than the one and only Queen of Pitt County, Connie Corey, who was president of the North Carolina REALTORS, sits on the Home Inspector Licensure Board. You've owned companies, you've raised grandkids and kids, and you very good wife to a very sweet husband. And I mean, you're kind of a big deal.
Okay. I really like the lady from Florida, the attorney.
I know.
I really liked her a lot.
I think everybody's listened to that episode either remembers that era and feels lucky not to have gotten into that trap, or just freaking wants to be best friends with her because she's so delightful.
Yeah. I'm surprised a lot of folks from Greenville didn't get investigated.
Well, I don't know that they could get to all the cases that were out there. I mean, we had 4 full-time FBI people just in Charlotte, which means any other community that was smaller probably did have people sneaking under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for any of my listeners who missed that, that's the episode with Rashmi, and it's a 2-parter, so you can find those links over here. You'll want to be friends with Rashmi too, but you'll have questions about the Great Recession and real estate too, because you were president during the Great Recession. Weren't you 09?
I was 03.
Wendell was 09. You were but you were 03 in what other year?
I've only been president once.
Twice. Who was president twice? Somebody was.
Of NCR? I was RPAC chair twice.
And RPAC chair twice. Actually, Canopy has a 2-year president right now. I get very confused on everything anymore. Oh, well.
Yeah. I can't keep up.
I quit. One of my agents was just saying something about something that happened a year ago. And I said, no, girl, that was like 3 years ago. She said, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I did it because it's like my grandchildren are all getting ready to graduate. I got 3 graduating from high school next year. 1 graduating this year. So next year in 1 year, I'll have 5 in college.
That's going to be a big party in your yard. You're going to get a big tent up and just have one giant graduation shindig?
You know, my crowd is still children at heart. They are very, I'd like to say, naive to the world. And they still want a giant water slide.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So that's what we do. We did for their 18th birthdays. They get a giant water slide and a big pig picking and all that sort of stuff. So, but it makes it nice when 3 of them are at the same time.
At a Dunkin' booth, though, because you're big East territory. They could all dunk each other. It would add to the water slide.
Yeah, they would love that. They would love that. They've all been best buddies since birth.
See? Cousins are the best.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've got 9 girls and 1 boy.
Oh, he's spoiled then.
Look, those girls ride him hard. I feel sorry. Now, I don't feel sorry because whenever he does get a girlfriend and a wife, he's going to know exactly how to treat them.
Well, that's true, and she'll have to be tough to get through the ringer of all them.
If he finds one that can go through the gauntlet, he'll be a lucky fella. Or she would be.
I told my son, I'm like, "Go find you a girl in the ag school. I want a girl that knows how to work, and she'll be tough, and she'll have a little meat on her bones, and then we've got the right kind of long-term play there."
Well, now I've got one that's going, wants to go to NC State for agribusiness. And right now, her and her boyfriend have a car detailing business. They work at a potato factory.
Mhm.
They do all sorts of stuff. So they're going to be little entrepreneurs out there. But she went through the FFA program.
Oh, I love FFA.
Yeah. And her older sister did. And they got scholarships, for going. And then she'll be going on a athletic scholarship for tennis. And she graduates in May.
At State? She got a tennis scholarship at State?
She's got offered a scholarship at Mount Olive.
Oh, I love Mount
So
Olive.
so she may go to Mount Olive and then transfer to State, but Mount Olive also has the same agribusiness program, so
Well,
and
I
then
was
I've
hoping
got,
that she would tell me she
got
could introduce Tim to some of her friends in the program, but if she's not at State yet, that won't help me find him a girl, so,
nah, she's got a sweet little boyfriend, and, I've got one that's graduated, from ECU, and she's trying to figure out, where she wants to get her master's, and then, next year, we'll have 3. One's gonna probably end up somewhere around Carolina, one maybe either State or UNCW, and the other one has just gotten a scholarship to Pitt Community College.
fantastic.
So, we're just blessed. All our kids are even even keel, smart, athletic. They don't cause any trouble. They could all end up in prison tomorrow, but, right now, knock on wood, the Lord's blessed us with some good kids. But,
So which
they
one's
got
gonna
good
get in real
parents.
is anybody gonna get in real estate with you?
I think they've been around it so much, they're not interested. They like, a steady paycheck. They like having weekends off, they like holidays, and
None.
one of my boys has his license,
Good.
but he's also a therapist. So,
But an actual therapist, not the fake kind that realtors claim they are.
yes, he's a substance abuse counselor. So,
I
and
mean,
he's
you're
been doing
checking the
that for
boxes
quite a
for real
while. And then I've got our middle is, he's a IT guy. He's real number smart. And then the youngest, he's, all about outdoors and in his hand with working with his hands. So he builds people's porches and barns and decks and that sort of stuff. So we got a good variety.
I mean, Connie, add them up, and they're like the perfect real estate office because you'd have all your repairs and building department, and you'd have your IT, website, social media department, and then you have the one who actually could manage the clients. I think it's a winning combination.
Yeah. Well, if I could figure out how to pay them when they'd like to be paid, but I am trying to figure out how to take them all off as a tax deduction.
There's got to be a way.
There's a way somewhere.
So now,
Corporate employees.
what year did you get into real estate, and what were you doing before real estate?
My passion before real estate was law enforcement. So I was in law enforcement right out of high school. And then I found out it didn't pay any money. And so I went to work for Watson Electrical in Wilson because it was a guaranteed salary and, the whole thing. And then when my son started playing baseball and I realized that I couldn't, get to the practices and that sort of stuff, I decided I had just bought a house. Easiest thing I ever did. I bought a house. I went to an open house, met the agent, never saw him, talked to him, or nothing until the day of closing. So I kind of pretty much did the whole thing myself. And after I saw what her paycheck was, I was like, I can do this. So that's how I got motivated to get into real estate, was because I thought it was going to be easy. And then I realized that if you really did your job, then it wasn't that easy of just meeting somebody at an open house and then showing up at the closing table. But then I started in 1986 when you got a salesman's license. And you had to be a salesman for 2 years
Mhm.
before you could sit for your broker's license. And when I got in, the listing agreement was 1 page letter size. The offer to purchase was 1 page legal size. And on the back of each page was the instructions on how to fill out the front page.
Oh, I like the instructions part. That would have
Yeah.
been helpful.
So, and that was it. And the only inspection you had was a pest inspection, and that was if it was a VA loan.
Oh, so nobody else did well, a
I
would-be
mean, I would
segment?
say they would do it if their parents had told them, make sure that house doesn't have any termites. So that was about it. It was, you go to a house and it had wood rot and it was just, wood rot. You could ask for it to be replaced if it was something you saw. But, inspections really didn't become popular until buyer agency started trickling out, in the
Really?
early 90s.
Okay. Is that when the disclosure statement came out, was with agency, or had that been out for a while too? Because that's all before my time.
No, we didn't get the disclosure statement. You're talking about the residential property disclosure? Or yeah, that was in the late 90s. Buyer agency had already started by then. It was kind of derived from buyer agency to give the buyer some knowledge of the property. But, sellers do then like they do now. They don't fill it out. They just check no representation and go on about their business.
Well, they
But
don't.
new form is a little bit different. And it's the responsibility on the listing agent and the buyer's agent is so great. I encourage my sellers to fill it out to the best of their knowledge. And when I deal with attorneys, they don't fill it out. They just
No,
check that representation.
and investors, but you don't blame them. They didn't
No,
actually go in the house, but
no.
regular people should fill it out, in my opinion.
Yeah, as best they can. Yeah.
So you've done a lot of everything. Has it always been in and around Greenville and Pitt County? Has that always been your home base? Are you from there?
I'm originally from Farmville. I did take 13 years and I lived in Wilson, which was like 40 miles down the road. My mama thought I had moved to China.
I mean,
Um,
it is a big town compared to Farmville and Snow Hill and
well, you couldn't drive to Wilson. It took too long. Back then it took about an hour to go from Farmville to Wilson because of the roads. Everything was 2-lane and all that. But I worked there. And then my son and I decided we would move back to Greenville because we felt like be closer to home and better education for him and better athletic programs for him. And so I was in Wilson for about 4 years. And then we moved back to Greenville. So my primary base has been Pitt County and the surrounding area.
I do like that you say Wilson the right way. I find that people who are not from here like to call it Wilson, but if you don't have the T in the middle, you ain't saying it right.
Exactly. Exactly. And my son calls it Wilson too.
Well, you can't raise him up out of that. He can't get above
Yeah.
his rating. So you've done, in your real estate career, you've done property management and sales, right?
Yes. Yes.
Which one do you like better?
Property management, I'm not a big company, a big property manager. I just do my clients and my close friends. So, I say it's a good income, especially when the market was down. I could buy groceries and gas
Mhm.
off of it. Most of my tenants are long-term tenants. Like most of my tenants moved in 07, 08 and have still been there.
20
So
years.
for me, it's really easy. I get some repairs done every now and then. And right now, I'm going through the process of having my owners do home inspections because their properties are ready for new windows and roofs and HVAC systems. So, but they've been taught and hopefully educated to save money, to put money back. So when the time comes to do that, they have the funding for it. But I've got excellent clients that listen. But my passion is actually residential sales. That's my passion.
Connie, why do you think people rent for 20 years and don't ever get they don't get the itch to buy, or they don't feel like they're capable of it? What is the hang up?
I think with the ones that I have, they went through a rough period, during that recession. And they found that renting was just so much easier. They don't have to worry if the refrigerator goes out or if it needs a roof or any of that. And I've got one tenant that I've had since 2005, and they're a big CFO. And he's like, this is the easiest place I've ever lived. He said, I don't worry about anything. If something goes wrong, I call you, it gets fixed. He said, I've actually enjoyed time with my family that I probably wouldn't have had because I'd have been stressed over paying taxes and, repairs and, insurance. And he said, I don't have to worry about that. He said, I write a check every month and I'm done. And when he originally started renting, his intent was to retire in 5 years, but they keep hiring him back. So, they've been there from the time one of their children was born, and now they're getting ready to go to high school.
It is interesting because whenever there's a conversation about tenants, I mean, even in the professional space, it's always that somebody has to rent. We never talk about them choosing to rent. And I actually
Yeah,
got into a big argument with some people on Twitter about this, which is a great place to argue with people. But this one fellow was saying everybody should own their house. And I said, not everybody wants to own their house. Some
exactly.
people want to rent, and we should have clean and safe options for them because they should get to pick. And he was ready to die on that hill that not every people are renters or slaves, is what he kept saying. I said, they're not slaves. And actually, your story tells it perfectly because your fella's looking at it as a way to make his lifestyle more what
Yeah,
he wants instead of owning. And he's willing to sacrifice the finances for that.
yeah. And I've got, I have tenants that when the market started being, better around COVID, that actually bought the units that they were living in.
Oh, that's
Because I sat down with them because I meet with my tenants once a year just to say, "Hey, how you doing? How's life?" And, I had 3 single moms that rented from me for years. They all rented townhouses, and we sat down and I showed them how they could buy that townhouse for less money a month than what they were gonna be paying in rent. So they all 3 of the sellers were out of state. They knew they weren't coming back, and it worked out. Now those were happy days. Those were happy closings that these people could take and not have to uproot and still stay where they enjoyed, where their kids were in school, where they were close to their jobs, and it worked out. It was a perfect match for them to just stay right where they are. They got a lesser payment, they got a tax deduction at the end of the year, and they're still there. They're still living in those townhouses.
See, and those are the closings you never forget
Yeah.
because it means something to them.
Yep. It was pretty cool. I think probably my favorite closing was I had a veteran that I worked with for 2 years to get his credit where it needed to be, and this gentleman was in his mid-60s. He had given his whole career to the Army. He had a disabled, benefit, a disability benefit, and he had a little job, and we were able to get a seller to pay 100% of his closing costs on his house, so he virtually got in for no money. And this was before, due diligence came into play, and I ride by there now, and him and his buddies are sitting down under that pecan tree, and he's exempt from property taxes from in Pitt County as well. And every time I see him, he'll throw up his hand in this, and he's got a slits in this one, and he just waves and he's just enjoying life. And he's probably in his 70s now, but
Good.
him and his buddies still sit under that pecan tree every afternoon,
I'm
loving
sure
life, and he's got his own home.
I do hope we get that disabled veteran property tax exemption statewide, but it hasn't picked up enough steam yet. How did y'all get it through in Pitt County?
It was actually something that I wasn't aware even existed when we did it. And the closing attorney, who was a veteran, told us that he would qualify to be exempt from county taxes. So we found him a little house out in the county, and he keeps it just as neat and clean and just as happy as a clam.
Oh, and he
So,
should. He
yeah,
served
and
honorably all the
those are the ones that just warm your heart, you
yes.
know? Because, I
And
mean, you work with them when you've been in it as long as I have. It's not somebody you meet on a Sunday and then you close in 45 days and you never see them again. It's a relationship. And some of the not most of them, but a lot of the clients I deal with are a process. They do have a blemish, on their credit. So we have to work through that, or we have to work through how to get their debt down and how to save a little bit of money and then finding the right property for them. Now, I will say in the last few years, that's been a harder process to do. because it's just not out there.
Yeah.
And but I've got people that I sold to when I first started that I've sold to their children. Now I'm selling to their children. So I'm 3 generations in of families. And, I've heard you say 100 times, it's all about relationships, and so it's not about the transaction. It's about those relationships. And, I'm obviously older and I go to my granddaughter's volleyball games and this little young fella comes up and he's got a kid about this high with him, a pretty little girl. And he said, "Miss Connie, do you remember selling us our house? This is the baby I was pregnant with."
Oh,
And I was like, I remember the house.
that's the weirdest thing about real estate. You're like, I should remember you, but yeah, you had 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, had the flower
Yeah.
wallpaper.
Mhm. I remember the house, but and I'll ride through neighborhoods and go, I sold that house, I sold that house, I sold that house twice, and it's just, I would have never had another career that I enjoy getting up every single day to come to. Never.
All right. So as you approach your 40th year in real estate, what do you wish new agents understood or did differently than they're doing right now?
I think for me personally, it's with the agents I work with is don't come at me like you know it all because you don't. You don't know it all. You hadn't seen it all. You know what you just got your license from. And I did have an agent a couple of weeks ago ask me how long I had been doing this because I obviously didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, I bet that went real well.
And we were talking about septic systems. And so I asked him, I said, "Did you go to the septic inspection?" "No, I did not." I said, "Then you've never seen one or smelled one." And they were like, "Well, no." I said, "Then, I am not a septic tank person, but don't talk to me about septic tanks until you've actually seen one and been to an inspection." I said, "I've been to hundreds." I said, "And I can tell you when there's a cracked junction box or distribution box is cracked and it needs to be replaced because it's not going to get uncracked." So it was a learning experience. But I think, a lot of the new agents I really enjoy working with. They are on point with filling out the documents and making sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. They are a pleasure to work with. They're respectful. And but I think probably the one piece of advice I would give is it's not all about social media. So many new agents have these excellent social media sites and they give out information that is really valuable to the consumer. But you've got to get face to face with somebody at some point, and you've got to have that personal conversation that doesn't come through a text or an email. So that would be the one piece of advice I would give.
Well, and to that point, there's a lot you learn by watching the tension in somebody's neck and
Yeah.
the contact and their stress level so you can respond because it's such a stressful business. And since you mentioned that septic tank, I'm just sitting here wondering why none of the septic people have written a guidebook for us called You Don't Know Shit About Septic. That would be a great CE course, and I would take that because
The septic company that I use most often, he does an educational process. Like when you go out to do, he goes out to do an inspection. He gets the buyer, if the buyer's there, the buyer's agent, and he goes through the whole gambit from the time he puts that shovel in the dirt till he pulls that suction pump out. And he does have like a little pamphlet, but if you don't understand what all the little drawings are and what each word means, it doesn't really help a whole lot. But he does an excellent job of explaining the process.
write a 4-hour class for continuing education
Yeah.
that we could send people to. But I was at a listing appointment earlier this week, and we walked out to the septic field, and I could see they had bull tallow soil. And I pointed it out, and I said, "You got problems over here. I see the bull tallow." And the daughter was like, "Well, how did you know?" And I said, "Baby girl, that's the dirt right here." And I said, "It's yellow." I said, "And that soil's the world's worst for a septic field." And she said, "Why do you know that?" And I said, "Because because I'm in real estate. And if you go to everything, to your point, go to the inspections and talk to the pros, you could learn to spot things. But when I spot it, the first thing I know to do is call the septic guy, because he's going to be able to tell me what did they do to that field to make it operate well. Because at a certain point, the shit's going to hit the fan.
Exactly.
So if you're in real estate and you're listening to this podcast or watching it and thinking, man, I need some more Leigh Brown answers in my life. Well, guess what, friends? I have a new program that is launching right now called Answers.Real-Estate, where I will give you every bit of insight I have to help you grow your real estate business, help you better respond to consumers, to provide a more excellent real estate experience, so that the next time you land on crazy shit in real estate, you'll have a better solution to whatever you ran into. Answers.Real-Estate. There are monthly plans available. You will love it. Get your coaching. Sign up with me today.
It's more than just showing pretty houses.
It's supposed to be.
You know, it's when I first got into it, I didn't realize the depth of what I needed to know or should have known before I sold my first house. And you know, it's I think I've been touting this with the home inspectors and the real estate commission, is we need at least part of our continuing ed to be about what a home inspector's role is.
Absolutely.
What expectations from your buyer or seller should be, and how to explain a report. We get, some of ours are 70, 80 pages reports. And if I was a new agent and got a report like that, I would be so dumbfounded and overwhelmed. And then I've got to sit down there and explain it to my client that I don't have a clue what to do. You know, and a lot of home inspectors are good about coming in and talking to them if it's something in depth. But then you don't always have that luxury of them coming in talking to your client to help them explain it. But I tell my clients, I said, you know, getting a home inspection is like going to the doctor. If you hadn't been to the doctor in a while and you've been in your house for a while, and then all of a sudden you go to the doctor and you found out you got heart problems and lung problems and breathing problems, you know, you got plumbing problems, electrical problems, HVAC problems, but you've been living in it, you've gotten used to it, you've gotten accustomed to it. You know, and then you go to the podiatrist and you got bad feet because you got a bad foundation and you got some wood rot under there. So, you know, that's why I always encourage my sellers, let's get a home inspection before we put this on the market so we don't end up in the emergency room in the final hour. You know, so home inspections are really important on either side, even with new construction, especially new construction.
So you serve in a special role here in North Carolina. You are a practicing realtor, not a home inspector, who sits on the home inspector licensure board. What do you find in that world that makes you want to serve in that capacity? Because it's not a paid role. You're not getting paid oodles and scads of money to go make sure that our home inspector process is good. Why do you choose to spend your time there?
I got approached about 8 years ago about serving on the board. And what piqued my interest about it was I've been doing this for a long time, but I really didn't know what their standards of practice were. I didn't know what exactly they were supposed to inspect, you know, because a lot of times you get a report and it refers you to a plumber or electrician or engineer or whatever. And so that was what piqued my interest about it. So I was truly honored to be asked by the governor to serve on that board. They were a little bit misleading because they told me it was a 2-year term, and it was actually a 4-year term. And so then I was so deep into it when my term was up that I was appointed for another term. So my actual 8-year term will be up this year. But I've really enjoyed it because it's home inspectors from across the state. So what might be an issue for you with radon might be an oil tank issue on our part or a septic tank issue. So, you know, they can't have a standardized reporting like we do because their issues are different based on the territory and the area they're in. When Helene came through, and I want to stop right here for a second. I cannot begin to tell everybody that listens to your podcast what you have done for the people of Western Carolina. The countless hours that you have spent. I wouldn't even begin to guess the number of your personal dollars that you have spent, the hours that you have missed from your family, from your work, from your other volunteer. But I'm going to tell you, I went through Floyd in the 90s, so I know what it takes. And just watching you since September or whenever it came through has been phenomenal. And it just touches my heart. And I've always admired you, but you're on a whole different level now of appreciation just for the dedication of people you don't even know. And your love for what you do, because it has nothing to do with selling a house. But at the end of the day, it has everything to do with real estate. And I can't thank you enough for what you and your team are doing. So back to Helene and home inspections. With the home inspectors, they have to know so much about so many different systems and zoning and codes and all that. And when a group from Eastern Carolina went to Western Carolina to help out up there, it was a little bit different creature for them. But it was a rewarding experience for them. And we had some of our staff from our home inspectors board that actually went and spent the night in tents and on the ground and spent weeks. They used their own personal vacation to go up there and help. And that's the kind of people I work with on the home inspectors licensure board. They're as dedicated to their career as we are to ours. We don't crawl under houses and through attics and run into snakes and rodents and unappreciative buyers and sellers. But what the board does is it kind of governs the licensees to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we're just finishing up an audit now of reports where home inspectors have to send in a minimum of 3 reports to be reviewed by an auditor to make sure that they are doing what their reporting is supposed to do and what their professional standards or code of standards says that they're supposed to go by, the guidelines they're supposed to go by. So, and it's, they have probably the least amount of complaints. They've got close to less than 2,000 home inspectors, and we probably have, 40 complaints a year.
Oh,
Whereas,
wow.
with the real estate commission, you got 40 an hour. So, but I've really enjoyed it. I've been honored to be the only female to ever serve on that board.
Ever?
I've been the only female to be vice chair and chair for 4 terms. So I've really enjoyed the guys I work with on there, and I really enjoyed the staff. And I'm going to be sad when I come off, but it's time for somebody else to take that role.
Man, I'm just sitting here thinking, first of all, I'm going to ask my home inspector if he's turned in his 3 reports for audit yet, but what would happen at the real estate commission if every licensed realtor, or actually real estate licensee, had to turn in their last 3 paperwork stacks to be audited? That would be a hot mess.
You'd have a lot of folks putting their license on inactive.
I mean, I'm just sitting here, like, I know how hard agents work, and they get very distracted. And I'm like you. I like the new licensees because I can say, "You forgot this. Go get this for me." Like, I have one I just put under contract, and the listing agent didn't have her people fill out the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. They signed it, and I said, "They did not fill this out." She said, "That's for the buyers to fill out." I said, "Actually, no. It's for your people to fill out, and we're ready for it. So you just send it right along, and they don't have to be ugly to each other. We just got to keep things moving along." But man, if we had to be audited on our last 3 contract packages, that would be interesting.
But I'm going to tell you, when you go from one document on each side to, 15 or 16 documents, but, every time you have a lawsuit, we get a form or we get an adjustment to a form. And, I'm at the point now where I just have a little checklist and, our office is paperless. So there's like a whole menu of forms that we have to turn in before we can get paid. And so that really helps. And you can't be in a hurry when you're filling out your paperwork anymore.
For anything.
It's not a matter of just click, click, click and typing in somebody's name and an address and a dollar amount. And, especially with all the new compensation forms and things like that, you gotta sit down and think about it. And it's not where you can just email it and it's back to you in 5 minutes, because they haven't read it. They haven't, and agents have to explain. If you're gonna get everything signed electronically, you better be explaining it to these folks before you send it to them to sign. And that comes back to that face to face. And, I understand that there's a lot of times you can't come face to face because during, COVID, when we were up here, I had clients, doctors that were coming in, residents that were coming in, never saw the property, never been to Greenville, didn't see the property, didn't see me other than FaceTime until the day of closing. And so now those residents have finished their residency. So now we're getting ready to list those houses. And thankfully, we've had a relationship along the way that they're still calling me back. So, it's
It's crazy to
it's
think
a whole
about.
new world. Mhm.
Well, it is, but the technology can be good. I mean,
Yeah.
you're an agent, you can use Zoom to share screen and go over the
Mhm.
documents before you DocuSign it, but don't just send stuff. It goes back to you and your grandkids. You invest the time and slow it down so that you can enjoy each other and know each other. And same thing with real estate. It doesn't mean you can't sell a lot of houses. It just means you got to slow down the process a little bit, get to know
Yeah.
people. And that way it does carry on for years down the road, and I think that's one of the blessings of this job is we do get to call people our friends after we finish the professional relationship, and then you can go back to professional mode later on if you need to.
And I've got clients that are in a hurry. And they're repeat clients, and this might be the 3rd or 4th house I've sold them or sold for them, and they'll call and they'll say, "Look, we decided we're gonna retire, just come list our house," and I'll go over there with my little stuff, and "We don't wanna hear all that, just tell us where to sign." And so I said, "Well, do you wanna do it electronically?" "Yeah, let's do it like that." But I still explain, "Now you're gonna get last time we did this, we had 5 forms, now we got 12 forms. So, I'm gonna know if you even looked at them or if you just went click, click, click." So there are some that you can do that with, but you better have a good relationship with them if you're gonna do it.
And you better have offered to go over the
Yeah,
changes, but as you mentioned, it's changing every year right now, and I know that every state's got changes going on. North Carolina, we're getting changes more than once a year, which is
yeah,
a lot for distracted realtors to absorb, but it also goes into why we have to be really focused on our profession. And I'm sitting here processing too this home inspection thought process that your inspectors in Eastern North Carolina have a different set of things that they encounter than we do in the Piedmont, than we see in the mountains.
yes,
Is also why I would want a geographically specialized home inspector, just like I want a geographically specialized realtor. And when
mhm,
I bought a house in Avery County up in the mountains, I know Avery County very well, but I don't know it as well as a local realtor does. So I want somebody up there to represent me to make sure that all of the anomalies of that area have been looked at. And
yeah,
I just never thought about the inspectors having that same.
yeah. Some people think a house is a house is a house, but the demographics are different. They're
Well, the
di
dirt's not the dirt's not the dirt. You got
Yeah,
sand, I got red clay, unless I got bull talent, and then you got some black soil. I mean, it's all over the place, and that changes the house too.
yeah, and our area is mostly agricultural. So, we got good sandy soil, but, we also have a lot of chemicals in the soil as well. And, but, a home inspector may come to my house and your house may be the exact same floor plan, but drainage issues may be different.
Right.
You know, you may not have an underground oil tank and I may not have radon, so there still are a lot of buried oil tanks in our area that people just don't know about because somebody went in and maybe put landscape over top of the spouts and things like that. But you get a appraiser out there who has been around and knows to look through the landscape And then the next thing you know, the listing agent's got an appraisal or inspection that says, oh, you got to bury an oil tank and you got to do some soil samples.
Well, I
So,
guess
and you may not have that in your area.
of the listing agent, the buyer's agent, the appraiser, and the home inspector, at least one of them needs to be old guard.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody old enough to know what they're looking for, and the other 3 can learn from that one, at least balance it out.
Yeah, I'm the old guard here because most of people my age have already retired.
What's the point in that? You get to a certain point in your career, the phone's just gonna ring. My dad retired after he became Realtor Emeritus, which for those of y'all that are not in the business, that's 40 years of continuous Realtor life. He got to Realtor Emeritus, got the pin, and that's the point at which you pay no dues to the trade association. Well, that was when he retired. And my mother could have killed him because she said, now you're not paying dues and you retired. He's like, I just wanted to get to 40 years. I was like, what are you doing?
It's definitely been an evolution.
You can't retire next year when you get to 40 years. You have to stay in.
I've always said as long as my brain and knees held out, I would stay in it. The knees are getting a little iffy right now. Thus the 2 black eyes, and but my brain's still hanging in there. So, but I just enjoy what I do, and my friends are like, "Well, what about your hobbies?" I don't have hobbies.
This
My
is it.
hobbies are coming into my office, dealing with my day-to-day work, and my grandchildren, and my husband. He's
And
just
I was like,
top.
Alan too. Alan's a project.
Yeah, Alan's my toddler in training. He's a super guy. He's been so supportive because Alan was a 38-year in his marriage widow, and his wife was an excellent homemaker. She raised 2 wonderful boys. They're so respectful and so kind, and then he comes me, who's the polar opposite, and because I work, I travel, I volunteer, I go to everything, but he is without a doubt been the strongest support system I could have ever found out there. And he doesn't, he traveled up with his job. He was vice president international sales for Alliance Tobacco, so he's traveled all over the world, but had never been to Washington D.C. until he met me. And I can honestly say that he is the one human I know that worships the ground that his children and grandchildren walk on. And they do him. Not many grandchildren call a grandparent or a parent for that matter every single day and say, "Hey, granddaddy, I'm just seeing what you're doing." Or,
Oh,
"Hey, granddaddy, I'm hungry. Can you bring me Bojangles?" Or, "Hey, Kaka, can you, DoorDash me some Chick-fil-A?" But that's the kind of relationship we have with our grandchildren. And I will say that had it not been for my career, I could have never done the things that I do with them. If I had stayed in the same career I had in my 20s, I would not be able to do what I do. So, real estate is a challenging career. It's a rewarding career. It can be profitable if you manage your money, but I'm gonna tell any new agent out there, if you don't know how to budget, this is not the field to be in. If
that's
you
the
don't if
truth.
you don't know how to take that check and put so much away for the IRS, so much away for your marketing and advertisement, so much for, I do my tithes. So I have a 4 bracket. I do taxes, tithes, bills, personal. And then out of that personal, I put so much away so that, like my grandkids, 2 of our sons and some of our grandchildren, my sister and her family just got back. I was able to send them all to Disney. And,
Oh, yeah.
and that comes from years of savings. It's so much paycheck goes towards my family. And so I'm a Christmas whore. And my grandkids, we spend the whole weekend together. Our children, my sister and her family, and we start on Friday. And the boys, bless their hearts, are such good sports because they wear matching pajamas, and we play games.
True love.
We play stupid games. And now 2 of our nephews and their families have incorporated into coming, and we start on Friday and we end on Sunday. And that weekend belongs to me, You can have all the other 51 weekends out of the year, but that weekend is mine. And we eat and the kids sleep in. And, my house is full of 20 some people and they don't care if they have a bed or a bathroom. They just, and the girls there's seven girls that get in my bathroom all at one time, primping, and I've got 4 that are going to prom together.
Oh,
Natalie and Sailor's prom is coming up in a couple of weeks, so Anna and Molly are going with them as their dates because the girls couldn't think of any boys they wanted to go with that would be fun, and the cousins were like, "Look, there's nobody more fun than your cousins," so they're all going together, and they're coming to our house. They're having pizza. They're getting their hair done. And they're doing it themselves. Like they're going to do each other's hair. They're going to do each other's nails, and they'll do each other's makeup. And then my grandson will load them all up and drop them off at the prom. And then we're excited because the whole family's spending the weekend at my house. And it's just, my house looks like a zoo. It's not.
there's nothing else you want in life than to have.
It's not. My house is decorated early child. I still have artwork from my 19-year-old grandson on my refrigerator.
Well, of course.
Our bookshelves are covered with pictures and ceramics and projects they've done at school. And I don't have all the pretty frou-frou stuff in my house, but it's comfortable.
Well, your house is not on the market, so you do not have to take all that down to stages. So you can do it, Miss Connie.
One of my girlfriends that lives right around the corner, she's also my stager. And I was asking her a couple of years ago, I said, what would you do if you came in my house and had to stage it? And she was like, just move. You just got to move. I'm like, okay.
You said, I'll do that someday, but not until you have to.
Not today. Not today.
Well, Miss Connie, thank you so much for coming on my show and giving us a little insight into a life that's well done and a career that's been well done. I'm so grateful for all you've done for real estate and for leading the way for people like me, because you've always been somebody I've looked up to, and I'm just so grateful to have you on the show today.
Well, that's why I let you call me Mama, and you're my baby girl.
That's right. And
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Point out, we didn't cuss on this show, and so we are definitely elevated today.
Well, you remember the conversation I had with you a few years back, about, I get where you're coming from, and you are a young me, but you got to clean it up when you get up there on that stage with that microphone, because some people don't like to hear damn shit hell.
And I listened to you. Did you notice? I'm a very good student.
You're very good. You had your listening ears on. I'm so proud.
God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Thank you. I love you so much.
I love you too. If anybody wants to reach out to you about Eastern North Carolina real estate, Greenville-Pitt County, what's the best way for them to find you, Miss Connie?
252-341-9969. Shoot me a text and I'll get right back in touch with you.
And as all y'all know, I will put all of her contact information in the show notes for this episode so you can reach out. And if you happen to be a North Carolina realtor and you want to find out more about why it's important to be involved or why it should be part of your career, you can always reach out to me, but you should maybe talk to one of my mentors too and talk to Miss Connie. So thank you so much. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
All right, babe. Love you and your chickens.
By the way, friends, don't miss my brand new coaching program at answers.realestate, where you can have access to Leigh Brown, submit your questions, have them answered, meet like-minded professionals, have an entire library to help you build your business no matter what happens in the market. Get signed up today. I promise you'll be glad you did. As always, I'm so super thrilled that you joined in for more crazy shit. And if you're a realtor, investor, inspector, lender, or just a regular human being who happens to have an unbelievable story that you need to tell the world about, or frankly, you just need to one-up the story you just heard, then make sure to DM me on Instagram at Leigh Thomas Brown, or tweet me at Leigh Brown, or frankly, any social network where you hang out. I'm there. And if you had some fun, then you totally want to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.